Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's Majlis. I'm very, very happy to welcome James and all of you who came to see him and hear him. When I first met James, roughly 15 years ago, he was already a professor in Cambridge. So that's really the peak of scholarly hierarchy and British intellectual establishment. Paradoxically, I see him as an epitome of the anti-establishment audacity. He is resistance and rebellion incarnate, at least that's how I saw him. A Scottish thinker studying and translating into English the brightest, most brilliant, and most reckless classical Arabic authors. Maybe I see James this way, as I'm myself hopelessly out of the box. And I've been thinking for decades about individuals, systems, and evolution. In this, I see James as a tree giving hope to us saplings. Well done, Cambridge. The strength and longevity of institution lie, at least in part, by allowing the unconventional talent to rise. I apologize to James for this unusual introduction, which may be completely wrong. And but those of you who know the structure of the Majlis, how it or are you attending it, you will know that the first part of the Majlis is dedicated to the journey of our guest in life in academia, sharing their experiences and advice before turning to the advertised topic. So James will present himself through this. And this time he asked me to ask him questions. So we will do this. Now I'm really bad in small talks and such things. So I would start with such a simple question. James Montgomery, who are you? What made you who you are? What are your aspirations? What has shaped and keep shaping you? And what you would like to be? But maybe if you have a ready answer for these questions, I'm very happy to listen, because with your wit, I expect you to have an immediate answer. But we can start at the very beginning with your background, family, and so on, and come back to these questions at the end of.
Yeah. Sure. Let's start at the start. Thank you very much, everyone, for giving up your valuable time to come and join us in this Majlis this evening. I'm very excited to take part. And when Istvan emailed me at the start of the year, I accepted with uncustomary alacrity, because the way in which he presented the format seemed to me to be one that was very much close to my heart. So I was born and grew up in Glasgow on the west coast of Scotland. My parents were very humble and simple people. My father was a scaffolder. My mother was a typist. Her father had been a miner when Scotland still had a coal industry. But they were part of the post-war generation, having been children and come of age as teenagers during the war, who believed that things should only be better. And their mechanism for improving our individual lot, and I think the fate of the world in general, was education. And so they were very, very keen on education. And never once in the course of my very, how can I put it, um, uh, of my, never once in the course of my childhood did they say no to anything that had anything to do with education. They were always prepared to sacrifice what little they had in order to help either me or my sister or my two brothers achieve whatever ambitions we'd set ourselves. So I think a lot of my uh, academic and personal journey stems from this one monumental act of generosity, of its selflessness on the part of two individuals who had a very hard life, had a very, very hard childhood themselves, but they were so optimistic in believing that if we could only become educated as a society, then things could only be better. And I benefited enormously from that. And of course, now that the post-war dream and consensus is being rapidly dismantled by rapidly dismantled, it leaves me somewhat dismayed to see that education is in many, many parts, certainly of the UK, not valued as much as it was when I was young. It's no longer one of the ladders for someone from my kind of background to actually achieve not only a very good education, but to live a very full life. But anyway, that's probably too somber to be getting started on, and I'm not in a somber mood. I'm in a very good mood. So, what was your other questions, Eastman? You asked me a whole pile of them. Who do I want to be? I can answer that one. I want to be myself. It's what I've tried all my life to do. But I would like one thing plus another 30 years of energy. If in my 60s I had the energy I had in my 30s, then I'd be happy to have another 30 years because there are too many things that I want to do. But sometimes I feel that the engine is starting to run out of gas. And so I have to be strategic. But I would like to be myself. And that's not because I think I'm anything special, but it's been hard enough getting to the age of 64 as myself that I don't want to give that away. And what else did you ask me?
Well, yes, first of all, thank you. Already, what you said already was really moving about your parents. And I'm also thinking about the well, enviable reply for ambition to be myself, because that's really a wonderful thing to have this ambition to continue to be yourself, because that means that you are happy with how you are. And
I
of
wouldn't
course,
go
this
that
is
far. I'm
okay.
still a work in progress.
That's good. Yeah,
I just haven't finished the job.
good. So what's the job? What? Okay, let's get back to this. But talking about education and your dismay about it, I had I had a proper shock when we read university instructions or guidance to students to have a managerial attitude to their studies and basically have kind of a consumerist approach
Yes.
to their studies.
Yeah.
For me, it's the exact opposite of of the mission I signed up for, and yeah, I find it incredibly disappointing that they they are uh, they are instigated by the institutions themselves to not to think about education for the joy of it and for the enrichment of it. How do you see these changes, and do you see a hope against this, or what's our mission in then?
I'm not 100% optimistic. I have a horrible feeling that, when I go to the supermarket in the UK to buy a product, the product will often have a series of bars and of circles in the bottom. Some of them are red, some of them are orange, some of them are green. In other words, this protein bar is high in sugar, and I think before long our courses will have such a color coding, because we started on the slippery slope of professionalization of the individual. There is, of course, personal branding, which is what social media and the internet absolutely hinges upon. It's only an influx of that we should therefore professionalize our lives. And I resist this at every opportunity I possibly can.
Yes. Yes, my feeling is that the somehow education is serving industry, all sorts of industry,
yes,
instead of forming human beings.
Exactly. I mean, I think we've all in this room been deeply affected in our lives by a teacher who inspired us. I was lucky, I met many of them who inspired me, and who somehow made it seem possible that I could actually have a go at what I wanted to have a go at. However wacky, however unpredictable, however unlikely I was to succeed. But they didn't stop me. And there was enough flexibility and room in the system for me to be able to do that. And as I watch, my first job, my first teaching job was in 1986. So I've been teaching for 40 years now. And steadily I have seen the compartmentalization, but also the shrinking of the educational horizon. And I understand that students are paying money for it. I mean, it's okay for me to preach. The taxpayer paid for my education, although I think I've repaid my education over in buckets from the amount of tax that I've paid over the years. But the taxpayer paid for me to go. Unlike my children, when they went to university, I don't have any student debt. I didn't have any student debt. It was an enormous privilege for me to be able to go to university. I also benefited greatly from the Rab Butler Education Act of the 1946. I think it was 47 in Scotland and 46 in England, which took state control of many of the schools and made it possible for people from the kind of backgrounds that I came from to go to. But the monetarization of our education is, I think before we reverse that, we will probably have destroyed the ecology of the planet. So I'm not too optimistic about the future of education when viewed from that point of view.
And what should be the ways to resist it? What can we do?
We can only really do it at the micro level with our students, because our students will be the policymakers, the decision makers, the citizens of the future. When I'm retired, is my students. And if I can help them see See, one of the things I realized as a parent, I have three children. My daughter Natasha um, is 36. My son Sam is just turned 35 yesterday. And my baby turned Josh, he turns 29 in a few days' time. So in a week today. Um, and what I've learned, one of the things I've learned as a parent, which is, I think, the hardest and most terrifying job that I've ever undertaken. And if I knew what was going to be involved, I think I might not have signed up for it. But anyway, it is also very fulfilling. What I've learned from them is that human beings need a horizon of expectations. The more you shrink the horizons, the less far they're able to see. And those horizons of expectation come in a variety of forms: choices, options, dissentient voices, not. And so, in the educational encounter in the classroom with our students, I think that we can try to inspire them to see that there is a series of choices and options and possibilities in front of them, and that the ones that the system is presenting them with are not the only ones. Of course, you know, as any experienced teacher knows, you always get the reports from the students. Well, what about the exam? And we do have to teach for the exam. I mean, that is perfectly fine. That is absolutely vital that we do so. I'm not talking about abandoning the syllabus and not teaching for the exam or anything of that sort. I'm simply talking that on the way towards that exam, you try to sabotage as much as you possibly can. And by sabotage, I mean it in a positive sense, that one simply doesn't train our students to be performing monkeys who are going to perform in an exam, but that they can perform and yet still remain intelligent, engaged human beings. And I think we do that through kindness. The one thing that has astonished me in the 40 years that I've been teaching, you know, when I was an undergraduate at the University of Glasgow, I came across many teachers and lecturers who were really kind and generous with their time. There was one man I remember. I studied Latin and Greek before I shifted to Arabic. And there was one man I remember who taught Greek history. Very erudite, very intelligent. I think he published one article in the course of his career because he thought what was important was teaching me, not a monograph that the overlords can use to squeeze some money out of a bankrupt system. What he thought was important was whether I was able to compare Athenian democracy with American democracy. I failed that question. I was rubbish at it. But he spent a whole hour, just me and him. He didn't need to. He gave me the essay back. He told me where I was wrong, where I should improve. But it was the sheer act of generosity, the kindness that he thought that there might be something in this 18-year-old who was as raw as anyone could possibly imagine. But that I, no less than the A-star student, deserved his attention. And that stayed with me forever. We didn't get on, that individual and I. It was not a happy hour or any of the hours that I spent being taught by him. But, and in fact, it kind of inculcated in me an aversion to the type of history that he taught. So teachers can have a positive and a negative impact on our lives. So I decided, thanks to my engagement with him, that I certainly wouldn't do that kind of history if I could possibly help it. But he was always willing to sit me down, to tear my essays apart, to give me feedback. He didn't stint on the criticism either. You know, but it's the sheer act of kindness and generosity. He could have gone down to the university club and had a drink instead, as many of my other teachers did back in the Britain of the 1980s, where it was mandatory to go to the pub for lunch, and then classes in the afternoon would be quite colourful. But So I think it's through small acts of kindness and generosity, of uh, viewing our our pedagogical life as a series of opportunities to share what we've been very fortunate to have acquired over the years. And in so doing, perhaps some small difference can be made.
Just about this generosity with time. It's also now academia is pressurized on everything, including our teaching. I think it's worse in the US, where there is this rate my professor, and then you can
Yes,
you can read your colleagues. And for me, I'm most at ease in my office, not in my office hour, but when I'm just talking to a student, and it's really my time, and I'm giving the student my time, which is not officially allocated time.
Yeah.
And then I know, then I'm free. I'm using my free time to share and enjoy freely the students' company. Yeah, this is also a factor, that this creeping control which goes into the profession in everywhere, which is
But
difficult.
you have to remember, Istvan, the other side of the coin of professionalization is busyness, busy hyphen ness. The system wants us to be busy, because when we're busy, we don't have time to think. We run around saying, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I'm late with this. I'm late with that. The system is invading every aspect of our professional lives. And so, I'm not advocating a return to the early 80s, where, I knew some teachers who would turn up for 2 hours a week and then just go and, do whatever they were doing. I'm not advocating that the amount of taxpayers' money that goes into the educational system in Britain should be abused like that. Far from it. But I'm just saying that we ourselves, as teachers, as educators, have to remember that be conscious of the ways in which the system is manipulating us. And it does so through keeping us busy.
And when you talk about the system, do you think this system is controlled and it's designed to be like this, or it has its independence, like a superorganism which lives, which is made of us and over us? And
of course, in the UK, the university system is part of an ecosystem, of a wider ecosystem, because we're dependent upon government funding. So I don't think that, the conspiracy theorist in me thinks that there are 4 or 5 awful human beings sitting in the room somewhere. I sometimes imagine that Satan and his dark angels are sitting in the corner of hell thinking, what can we do to them now? like the Terry Pratchett novel, Good Omens, where the devil invents the M25 to bring as much misery to the UK as possible. So there's a bit of me that thinks that would like to think it was as simple as that. I don't think it's as simple as that. Far from it. We're part of a kind of ecosystem. We're responding to uh, pressures. There are, I think, one or two, three or four events in the past, decisions taken that have really unforeseen consequences. Research assessment exercise being, I think, one of the single most important and baneful aspects of the last 40 years. I don't know how many people in the audience know this, but I lost my first job at the University of Glasgow because of the research assessment exercise.
Wonderful.
Um, the department, there was only two people in the department, and I had been hired to teach, and the professor had been hired to do whatever it was professors did back then. But he was even more of a nonconformist and a maverick than I expect I am. And so the first research assessment exercise rating for the University of Glasgow was 1, the highest being 5. And that of course kickstarts a whole process in which senior managers in the university, usually academics, have to make decisions about priorities and where the money is going to go and so on. And so I found myself with two children, both under the age of one I think was 14 months, the other was newborn. And I was told, you don't have a job. And I thought, when that happened, I thought, oh, maybe I will have to become a school teacher. So I got my Latin and my Greek books out, and refreshed my Latin and my Greek, and started looking for employment in the private school sector in Scotland, because the comprehensive school sector that produced me had lost all of its teachers who taught classics for some of the same reasons that I'd lost my job. And but miraculously, and I don't know how this happened, there was a job opening at the University of Oslo in Norway, which I applied for, and I came third. First was a very, very distinguished scholar, Bernd Radke, expert on Abbasid Sufism and so on, and he was in the University of Bergen already, but I don't know. He declined the job. Then it went to the second person, and that second person was, in my opinion, an even more distinguished scholar called Stefan Leder, very important figure in the study of Arabic prose and adab and so on. But I think his wife decided that she didn't want long, cold winters. And so eventually, the wheel of fortune spun and the arrow pointed at me. And it was either uproot my family and take them from Glasgow to Norway, or be unemployed. And I'm very fortunate that I have an extremely patient and supportive wife. And I was quite surprised, but very, very touched when she said, okay, let's give it a go. And so we uprooted ourselves, moved to Oslo. And it was a wonderful thing when I went to Oslo. I mean, I didn't realize that Norway had only just set up a sovereign wealth fund. So it wasn't quite as rich as it is today. I mean, it was rich. But the what really took me by surprise was how fair and how egalitarian they were in their approach. You know, I've applied for jobs in all sorts of places where, you know, I've been told you teach 2 courses and you turn up and they want you to teach 6. In fact, that's what happened in Cambridge when I first turned up here in 1997. I ended up teaching pre-modern Arabic literature, modern Arabic literature, a bit of theology, a bit of philosophy. And it was pretty much a rule of last in, you know, you do everything that no one else wants to do. But in Norway, it was, no, we want you to teach 6 hours a week. And that didn't vary throughout the whole time there. So that eventually gave me a chance to, you know, develop a couple of projects that I hadn't had a chance in Glasgow to get ahead with. So yeah, the research assessment exercise, I think, has had a profoundly transformative nature effect on the UK university system. And it has also, paradoxically, with the introduction of fees, led to the undervaluing of teaching. Because our university overlords take the student income for granted until recently. And with the collapse in the humanities and applications for the humanities, the universities are having to reconsider this situation enormously, which is a good thing, I think, because we have undersold our undergraduates for the last 10 to 15 years at least, if not longer. And I see this as down to the pressure that we produce 4 articles in a monograph, 2 monographs, or whatever, in this kind of endless, insane Californian gold rush for income. Yeah, how did we get onto that?
So, just something on the research excellence framework. There is the element of originality in it, one of the requirements. I used to call it originality as required by the establishment.
Yes.
So, think how original you should be in that.
Yeah. You know what? The day I have an original, truly original thought, I will retire and congratulate myself and put my feet up and feel very, very proud of myself. All of our thinking is necessarily derivative.
Yeah.
Originality, it's like watching a TV advert. You know, the same old detergent is being sold with a new and improved recipe. They just can't call it an original recipe because it's the same as the last detergent. And I don't know what I would do with myself if I had an original thought. You know, I'd have to be someone like Ludwig Wittgenstein. He had lots of original thoughts, but he was kind of as mad as a box of frogs.
Yes, but also if you come up with something relatively original, it can be way too original for the framework. So that's
a very good point. That is that, you know, what might be a old rope in one subject might be a silk embroidered piece of damask in another.
So the other thing what you said about the conspiration theories, I think in my teenage discussions with my friend, I said about these that I wish there were these groups of people who or Satan or whomever who controls these things. But the thing is, they are not controlled. Because if it were some group of people, you could convince them, you could eliminate them or whatever. But these systems are not controlled. They are controlling us. Of course, some people benefit from them or they think they benefit from them, but
yeah,
it's they have their own own agency, and that makes it so difficult to do. You mentioned the collapse of the humanities. What should we do about this? What are your predictions and hopes? Or
Oh gosh, no. I think that one's too complicated to answer. I think where we went, it will bring me back to the last question, because where we went wrong was where we have gone wrong is thinking that we're only talking either to ourselves or to a group of experts, normally people on a panel who are going to assess us. We've forgotten how to engage with the community that we share the space with, like the outside world, the non-university world.
you mean we, as in scholars in the humanities?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yes.
agree. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
we've you look at the population, the popularity rather, of a program like In Our Time. A program that I on BBC Radio 4 broadcast on a Thursday morning. It's effectively one man talking to three experts on the subject. There's no videos in the room, and it's really just a conversation about what these experts know. And it's one of the most popular and most downloaded programs on the BBC network. There is, theatres have been the warning that theatres are about to die has been broadcast for the last 20 years or so, and yet still people go. There is an inherent sort of instinct in people that they want to be exposed again, as I said earlier, to different horizons, to different ideas, and not just the stuff that they tend to be spoon-fed. So I think that we are missing a huge opportunity to
Yeah.
actually engage with society.
Yeah, that's my hope too, that humanities are eventually quite important for humans. So humans are interested in them.
They
It's
are
just
they are
somehow
profound,
bent.
they are profoundly interested in
Yeah,
it. But if we carry on the way in which we're going, we'll kill the humanities.
indeed. Yeah.
If I have a plea, it's get rid of jargon. Start using plain English. And I know for a lot of okay, I see there's a question from Matthew. Hello, Matthew. You
Hi, James. Good to see you.
Hi. Hello. Hello, Matthew. I was about to, once I get off my soapbox, I was about to talk about Mutanabbī, but we can talk about it now if you want.
Well, I'm
So,
just worried about the time lapsing. We don't have hours and hours, so I'm just
okay,
interested in what you have in mind.
I wanted to ask you this because normally I would be I'm happy to stay longer, and we usually stay longer. I don't know, James, how much time you have. We
Yeah,
haven't.
I have as much time as it takes.
So I was wondering about whether to, because I very much enjoy the discussion with you, and this is an opportunity to say things which are not in a normal, um, not shared in a normal academic meeting. Um, so yes, well, maybe if you have, let's not talk then about the your career more in detail. But if you could still say what advice you would have for, if you have any thoughts on
Yeah,
most
okay.
important experiences and advices you would like to share, what you wouldn't, yeah, for which this
Sure.
format is useful.
Sure. Let me just finish the last topic before we move on.
Yeah.
I will do a bit of screen sharing. if I may, and just to bring this to colleagues' attention. So that's al-Mutanabbī. Forget about the music that I listen to. This is a screenshot of Spotify. I have recently launched a podcast series. There are 4 podcasts that I've uploaded: al-Qais, al-Jāḥiẓ, The Brethren in Purity, and Hayy ibn Yaqdhan. There'll be another 4 in a couple of months. I think that we're living in a moment where things like podcasts are one of our solutions to getting, as it were, out of the university and trying to communicate. And so I think that we have a lot of resources at our disposal in order to reach out to the wider world and to the non-university world. This podcast I have aimed largely at the 4th year undergraduate master's student level. So you can find us on almost anywhere. We're still trying to work out how to get onto YouTube because we don't film ourselves, but the Classical Arabic Literature podcast. So please follow us. The more people who follow us, the more likely we are to be able to make more podcasts. So I think that's one way in which we can try to reach beyond the confines of the university space. Now, you asked me another question there. Yes, advice. I've already given most, I suppose, of the advice that I would like to give. I suppose I would say is we need to remember that the job we do, we're very privileged to do this job. It's a real privilege to be able to go into the office and to teach students and to read the sort of things that I want to read and that I might even read in my spare time. You know, that is a huge privilege. And I think we forget sometimes that this is a privilege. It's not a right. And you can tell from what I said about my background and my upbringing that I think that privilege is something that we need to work hard at. We need to be responsive to. My other piece of advice to any PhD students, younger scholars, criticism. Seek for criticism. Get feedback. Welcome unproductive feedback that is not going to be congratulatory. Welcome feedback that is going to make you rethink and go back, possibly to the beginning. I have an anecdote about that from my own experience. In 1988, I gave a paper at a conference in Budapest. And the paper was well received, so I thought I should go and write it up. And in the course of writing it up, a friend had said to a colleague at the University of Oxford that I was working on this. And this senior colleague at the University of Oxford expressed an interest in reading my paper. So I sent him a draft of the paper. It wasn't finished. My ideas were not fully fleshed out. I got 3-4 weeks later a 2-page letter in which he tore every single idea I had to shreds. And he didn't do it politely. And of course, naturally, I was very hurt. It's only, I mean, we're only humans. We like to be told we've done well. We don't like to be told that we haven't done well. And I learned a lot of things from that feedback, because when I revisited the subject 5 years ago, I realized that he was right, but and that I was wrong, but I wasn't completely wrong. There was something in there that I then developed. But we need criticism in order to develop our ideas. I mean, no child gets up off the bottom and walks without falling down. We need to fall down every once in a while. It's how we pick ourselves up that is the determining factor. So for younger scholars, don't be afraid of criticism. And one of the concomitants of the kind of issues that we've been talking about busyness and originality and so on, is that the culture of reviewing books by your peers has died.
Yeah.
You don't get any prizes for reviews. And yet some of the most important advances in many subjects have come through one scholar reviewing another scholar's work. So I think, and let's all be kind to everyone apart from our overlords. Just try to avoid them as much as you possibly can.
Well, thank you very much. This nicely fits to the image of Kalīlah and Dimnah you showed in the postcard. They would have very much agreed. The heroes giving advice there with what you have just said, and I think that's a nice link to Mutanabbī as well.
Let's keep Matthew happy and get on to Mutanabbī, shall I? So let me share if I can find it. Here we are. Okay. So, yeah, translating Mutanabbī, some anxieties. I called this talk A Future Remembered because when I decided I was going to do a PhD in Arabic, I wanted to do a PhD on al-Mutanabbī. I didn't do it because I didn't think I could understand Mutanabbī if I didn't study pre-Islamic poetry. So I decided to begin at the beginning, and I did my PhD on pre-Islamic poetry. Problem was I never really escaped from pre-Islamic poetry. So I had this idea that I would begin with the pre-Islamic panegyric, and I would move on to the Umayyad. The Abbasid panegyric had already been amazingly studied by Stefan Sperl in his Mannerism book, and that would then allow me to engage with Mutanabbī. But now that I've had so on a personal note, 4 years ago I survived my second stroke, and the recovery of from the stroke, I couldn't talk, I couldn't walk or write or type. And as I was recovering and trying to regain these skills, I had a lot of time to think. And my recovery got me thinking about the choices that I'd made all those years ago. And it had always been in the back of my mind that I might try to translate Mutanabbī. And so I have been thinking very much about this. And I began in a very matter-of-fact way. So the Dīwān contains 320 poems. So that's about, 7,000 lines of poetry, say. Now I work out, excuse me.
Excuse me, James. Some Kumail writes me to ask you to opt for presenter mode on your screen, so then we can get a better view
Okay,
of the
where do I
text.
find that? Up here? Presenter view.
Yeah.
No, if you go at the bottom, yeah.
Is this?
You want me to
No,
go down here?
yeah, on the right-hand side of the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one, yeah, next one, yeah. Yeah,
Is that
that's it.
better?
Okay, yes, that's it.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Kumail.
When I've experimented with translating poems, a 40-line poem takes me about 25 days to come up with a first draft. That's almost a month. So if I do my maths badly, that would take me 22 years to do the whole Dīwān. So I would be 86 by the time I finish the first draft. And I'm not sure that I want to spend that amount of time doing it. Now, the Dīwān's arranged by, I think, Mutanabbī al-Tayyib chronologically. There are 5 phases to this poetic biography. There are 60 poems of his emergence as a prophet and a itinerant panegyrist. There are odes from when he praised Syrian warlords. There's 98 of them. There are sword poems, the Sayfiyat, 82 of them. Poems for Kafur from Egypt, that's 30. And then the death of Mutanabbī, which the end of his career. There are 16 poems there. So I thought it's quite feasible to approach a translation by focusing on one or more of these phases. Now, the Sayfiyat are very famous. They've been well studied. There's an excellent study of them in Italian. The poems for Kafur are notorious for their racism and are probably not the best poems to begin with. But the beginning and end of the career have been really studied, let alone translated. And I have grown a particular attachment, a fondness to the final poems from the end of his life, from when he returns from Egypt. They remind me very much of the strangeness of Beethoven's late string quartets. So my current project is a translation of the poet's final poems. That raises a problem that 17 poems are only 5% of the Dīwān, so not very representative. So I decided to shift the dial back a bit and to begin with the amazing poem that Mutanabbī composes on being bedridden with a fever. And it's a fever that's both physical, emotional, and metaphysical. And from that point on, he describes his escape from Egypt and return to Iraq. Now, conveniently, there are about 16 poems from the fever poem onwards, and that gives me 10% roughly of the Dīwān. And it's about reasonably manageable 3 or so years of work. Now, the one thing that confronts, as I've learned from the Library of Arabic Literature, the one thing that confronts a translator is which version of the text to translate. And whilst the Library of Arabic Literature started out as a translation project, it very soon became an editing and translating project because we had to pay as much attention to the text to be translated as to the translation itself. Now, an even more daunting task than just translating the Dīwān would actually be to edit the Dīwān. There are hundreds of manuscripts dotted around the world, and it would take a team of scholars, possibly an enhanced ERC project or whatever, just to begin to scratch the surface. So there are two versions of the Dīwān, and both come with commentaries. The principal one is that of al-Wāḥidī, and most of the commentaries that are used, that were written, rely on this tradition. But there's another version by al-Ma'arri, the great poet and scholar. He called his commentary Mu'jiz Ahmad, Ahmad's miracle. I think he's alluding to both the doctrine of the miraculous Quran and Abu Tayyib's prophetic ambitions. The problem is that the manuscript tradition there is not as good, as well attested, or as continuous. It's one step removed, I think, from Mutanabbī's own copy of the Dīwān. So everything that I have been trained to do says that I should work on the best attested version, that of al-Wāḥidī, but I much prefer spending my time in the company of al-Ma'arri than of al-Wāḥidī. And the opportunity to read one great poet in the company of another great poet was overwhelming for me. And I like to think of it that it's a bit like Dante being guided by Virgil, that I'm being guided to the Paradiso of al-Mutanabbī by al-Ma'arri. So the other big issue with Mutanabbī, of course, is what people refer to as untranslatability. Al-Mutanabbī cannot be translated. That he was a problem for the tradition is obvious, because there are so many commentaries. And you get commentaries when scholars are struggling and students are struggling to understand the original. His poetry was also controversial. There seem to have been as many people who disliked it as those who actually liked it. Now, of course, Mutanabbi's poetry can be kind of hard at times. The stridency of his ego doesn't always sit well in the modern mindset. His Arabic syntax can be extremely imaginative, and his lexicon is always obscure. And his poetic project, I think, was to reimagine Arabic not only as a language, but also a reimagining of the Arabic poetic and prophetic canon. I don't think Mutanabbi ever stopped thinking of himself as a prophet throughout his life, whatever he claimed. The result of all this, of course, is that most people say Mutanabbi can't be translated. He's untranslatable. So why on earth should I even attempt to render one line of his poetry into English, let alone 33 poems? So we need to think a little bit about the untranslatable. Now, there's a paradox. Either everything is translatable or nothing is translatable. I don't know of a category that is untranslatable, unless it be that great philosophical conundrum of the 70s and 80s, the private language. So when people say that something is untranslatable, what do I think they mean? These judgments, I think, or opinions are usually informed by a kind of maximal utopian notion of translation, in which translation is understood as a mirror image of one language, in which every aspect of a statement or text is reflected in a second or a third language. So when people say this, they have an idea of translation as a kind of holding up a mirror to the original, and the original appears in the mirror as in a different language, but in the same form. And such statements also focus negatively on what is lost or unrecoverable in translation. And finally, I think that declaring that something is untranslatable is often actually an inflection of a different position. There's a kind of ideological or a proprietorial or political reluctance. Basically, to say that something is untranslatable often means I don't want you to translate that for whatever reason. So what do I hope to achieve? First of all, I have learned from my work in the Library of Arabic Literature that translation is what a friend at Yale calls damage control. It's an exercise in loss. If you don't want to get used to a loss, don't translate. I will, in the process, have to sacrifice much, if not most, of what I, guided by al-Ma'ari, hear in the poems. I have to acknowledge that I won't succeed in satisfying myself, to say nothing of anyone familiar with the poems in Arabic. But in order to attempt a translation, I have to search for what I refer to as an intimation of my own Mutanabbī. I have to continue to listen for his poems. And I think the result will be a hybrid creature. So in other words, it will be Mutanabbī Ma'ari Montgomery, conveniently 3 M's. And what I want aspire from this project is that readers of modern English poetry will pick it up and not say, what's all the fuss about? I thought this guy was so good. As happens with so many of the translations in our discipline. People pick it up and say, you've really been making a fuss about this, but it sounds so, what's the phrase that Shaukat Durawa loves to use? Dorky. And so really the target audience would be people familiar with how modern English poetry is written, and that they might even get a remote sense of what it is in Mutanabbi's poetry that makes him so special. I thought what I should do now is give you an example. Here is al-Mutanabbi's last poem. He says he's bidding Adl the Dawla in Shiraz farewell. And some of this poem, very interestingly, seems to intimate the end of his life. But I'll just read the first 3 or 4 lines so we can move on to the discussion. So I translate this as, I call the poem Hollow Men. You surpass us all, we pledge our loyalty. All kings are your vassals. If I'd cried, your peers are your vassals, I'd have wished your rivals a long life, excluding from our oath kings, stanchions of the realm, who use largesse as a trap, scattering their seeds over a net. And those shirkers, unable to rise above the ground, though granted access to the heavens by position. Their hearts may stay true to their pledge, but their actions would remain hostile. Opposites repel, and you despise meagre reputations fattened in luxury's lap. And those last few verses, sorry, I'm not very good at multitasking, are there. And so I think this is one of Mutanabbi's greatest poems. It has a sort of sonority in the Arabic that I think I've tried to capture. And what I want to do is to capture it in as simple English as I possibly can. The English, what I've learned is that if I lapse into complexity in a translation, I will probably end up falling into the next trap of the translator of Arabic poetry, the Edwardian inflection. Darkling the wraith visited me at night. You know, every modern, not every, many modern translations of classical Arabic poetry are indebted to that great explosion of interest in Arabic poetry that was represented at the end of the Victorian and the Edwardian period, with people like the Blunts and Charles Lyell and so on. And of course, it's how we in the English world study those poems through the medium of those translations. And it is what so many people think that the poetry almost ought to sound like, but it doesn't sound like that to me. So I hope in the discussion that there'll be enough questions to ask me about some of the details of the project. That's a project writ large in all of its simplicity. Well, I know all I can say, Istvan, is thank you very much for giving me this platform to introduce the project to so many friends, and I see so many friends in the names on my screen. Some of them I haven't seen for a long time. And I see that there are lots of people I would like to be friends with. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, James. So, yeah, I will conclude the recording, and we go to the questions, which is not recorded, in order to keep everyone free, ask whatever they would like to ask without having it up until eternity online. So thank you.
And thanks for all the love. I haven't been on Zoom for quite a while, and I'm not used to all these exploding hand claps. I'm really quite touched. It's very sweet.